Hey, I'm Vulture Culture, and my word cannot be trusted because I am paid off by the mega synth corporations. But if you want to hang out, tonight we're going to be checking out the legendary KORG POLYSIX analog polysynth from 1981 and shooting it out against one of my favorite polysynths from the 80s, the Akai AX60 from 1986 or so. And the reason these two synths are super interesting is they both are sort of alternatives to the Roland Juno series, the Juno 660 and 106. And both of them have voltage controlled oscillators as opposed to digitally controlled oscillators. So they're a little bit more wide sounding, a little bigger, a little bit more beautiful sounding. And they're relatively inexpensive. So last week we checked out the Chroma Polaris versus the Prophet 600, which are the two cheapest dual VCO 6-voice analog polysynths you can get from the 80s. And the KORG POLYSIX and the AX60 represent the two cheapest, I believe, single VCO plus a sub oscillator per voice that you can get from the 80s. We'll talk a bit more about the history and stuff as we get going, but for now, I'm actually going to just sort of create a standard patch here. It's great with the hands-on control. Both of these have awesome hands-on control, and it's very easy to just set yourself up with something in a couple of moves here where it should sound pretty much right on. Let's see. There we go. We can put this. And I've got a preset here just to, so we can check out immediately some of the differences. And what I like to do is check out the sawtooth sound first, so you can get a rough approximation of what the oscillators sound like. In this case, there are substantial differences between the oscillators. And so I think it's actually better to check out the filters first, hear how the filter sounds, if you guys are okay with that. And then we'll come back and check out the oscillator section because it is complicated. So we're going to start with the POLYSIX, and you'll notice that the oscillator sound is incredibly warm. It's probably the darkest, warmest sounding in the 80s, and I've got quite a few. So we'll just start off down low. Listening to the AX60, the difference is pretty noticeable at the high end. So listening to the lowest notes first. Actually a little darker on the AX60. Very similar at that octave range, going up an octave. This is where it goes crazy, how much more fizz and buzz you get out of the oscillators from C3 or so and up. The POLYSIX filter just doesn't let anything through, and that's even if we turn the EG intensity all the way up, the sustain all the way up. We maybe get a little bit more, but you also hear how the POLYSIX tuning is less stable across the key bed. You can hear that they're a little bit more out of tune versus down here, they're very in tune. So the filter's just not letting those oscillators through, or the high end's just not there in the oscillators, period. Highest note. I mean, again, it's just kind of following this trend of there being an incredible amount of high end that you can get out of the AX60. Let's go ahead and check out the filters. And I think the filters where we're really going to hear something interesting, because ever since, so let's talk about real quick what you're going to hear when we do a filter sweep. So the main way synthesizers were made in the 80s especially was with analog integrated circuits, or what we commonly call chips. And there were two big brands. There was Solid State Music and Curtis Electromusic. And the original Prophet 5 used solid state music chips, SSM chips. And they're really warm, great sounding chips. With the Prophet Rev 2, it was still solid. When they went to the Prophet 5 Rev 3, so this is still a 70s analog synth, they moved to Curtis Electromusic because the chips were more stable. And people started to complain and say that the Prophet 5 Rev 3 actually sounds cold, which is kind of funny because it was before the DX7 when we got to hear some really ice cold synth sounds. But for analog synths, Curtis chips have always had this sort of reputation for sounding cold. And what's so great about these two synths is they have very similar architecture. Oscillator sounds a little different, so take that into consideration. That's why I wanted to just cover the sawtooth real quick, that you're never going to hear the high end out of this. And so that will make it warmer regardless of what's going on in the filter. But what we have going on here is a solid state music chip in the filter of the KORG POLYSIX, and on the AX60 we have a Curtis chip. So we're really going to be able to hear, for the first time, ironically, I do a lot of these live streams shooting out to synths every Wednesday at 9. Something synth related, but this is actually the first time we're doing a direct shootout between SSM filter chips and CEM filter chips. And I want to know, is it actually true that the CEM chips sound cold? So with that, welcome to the stream, everybody. I'll catch up with the chat in a bit, but I just want to get started with a nice little filter sweep. All right, so let's go ahead and do a nice sweep here. And with the AX60, let's see here if I need to VCF EG all the way down. There we go. Really very similar with the resonance all the way off. So why don't we take the resonance up to about 2.5? Nice little growl. Now this is not a Tontec modified AX60. I intend to throw that mod in there at some point, but in the meantime, this synthesizer is not modded, and there's this weird thing about the way the faders work, so I'm going to try to avoid that being too much of a contaminating issue, but it might be there. So just be aware of that. So we're going to now do a filter sweep with about 25% resonance. Sounds pretty good. All right, can I get some synth snobs in the chat to describe what we're hearing? Because although I like to give you guys what I'm hearing, I always love to hear from you guys what you're hearing, and I've got a lot of people in the chat who know more about synthesizers than I do. So what are we hearing here, and what do you guys think as far as the sound between these two chips at 25% or so? There is a difference. The oscillators are a little less stable in the POLYSIX, so you're getting a little bit more wilderness in the VCOs of the POLYSIX, and so that makes it sound a little bit better. And that's not something I can really do anything about. That's just the way POLYSIXs are. Let's add some release to this sound here real quick, actually. It's reminding me a little bit of the Roland JX3P, where it's got like this sort of darker vowel tone, whereas the Curtis chip to me has like a little bit more of a preciseness to that that resonance is a little bit chirpier. Wow, the difference there. What did I do here? I feel like I lost a lot of volume. Oh, probably that. Yeah, there we go. The amount of low end difference. And some of that, of course, is just the oscillators, right? I don't know if it's fair to compare that, but Poly 6, though, I mean, just the warmth you get off of Poly 6. When people ask me, like, what's the best vintage synth to buy, I often mention the Poly 6 just because it's like the furthest thing from a VST. So in some sense, if you had to have only one synthesizer, to me, this one sounds so far from a VST that it's kind of like you could just use VSTs or like one workstation and one of these guys and probably be okay. V for Vendetta, welcome to the stream. Sonics are more powerful in the KORG. Jason says the Poly 6 sounds louder, brighter, and cleaner. I did try to match the oscillator volume at least. But I think as we add resonance, the way they scale will be different. So there's not all that much I can do about that. Rich says the Akai had an oaky flavor. That's an interesting comment. Hypothesis, welcome to the stream. Dub says, I can feel the CEM growl in my sphincter. Bubbles a little slower. I'm quite a fan of the CEM growl. I've noticed that ever since I really cranked the resonance on my Ensoniq SQ80. Walter says the Poly 6 should really get as much love as the Juno. I think it was... I don't want to get the YouTuber's name wrong, but it was one of the really old school retro sound, I think, YouTubers, and he did a comparison between, I think it was a Juno 106 and a Poly 6, or maybe a Juno 60, and that's why I bought a Poly 6, actually. I considered it, and then I heard that, I was like, holy shit, the Poly 6 sounds better almost every time. So it's a really great synth to have. Big flaw, well, there's a few, but like the biggest thing is just the fact that the chorus is not stereo. But what are you going to do? Let's bring the resonance up to 50% on both units. So we're going to try, if you see me do a weird little wiggle, it's to try to avoid the way the values in the AX60 work. It like counts how fast your slider is moving before it updates, which was a way to sort of avoid having issues with noise in the faders and stuff like that, but it ended up being kind of like a little overkill. And the Tontec mod addresses that. So let's go ahead and check this out. I'm going to try not to talk between these two because this is where it's going to get interesting. So I'll give you one more good, clean filter sweep. I forgot that filter steps. What are we hearing, guys? All right, so what I'm going to do is actually use the VCF here to create a little bit of a filter sweep for us. And then we have it in, we'll use the filter envelope here to do the same thing. And Wow. This is fascinating. The wilderness of that envelope is actually kind of crazy. Let's see here. Let me catch up. Bobby says the resonance, by the way, welcome to the stream, Bobby, on the AX60 is off the charts. Adamski says the 3320 filters, the bass losses, the resonance goes up, gives a whole different balance between you hearing the filter, where the SSM 2044, you can hear it clear it is, pushing the amplitude of the resonance through the, yes. Then Dubstation correctly points out the AX60 is 3394. And then, let's see, V for Vendetta says Akai has more color on the synth. Widow says, I love all the makes and models. They all have their own sound. It's good to have a large collection because you never know which one you're going for the right sound. I agree, but I also think that like my setup is like so over the top and not necessary. And so part of why I do these streams is I bought these synths because aside from the other YouTube, you know, demos of these things, which aren't always of the best quality, or they have like a particular perspective, I hopefully want you guys to be able to make better choices than I did, and be able to hear them. And also sometimes my preference is not your guys' preference. I would say about 70% of the time I agree with the overall chat. And then there's about a 30, maybe 20, 15% of the time where I'll have a counter chat perspective where, you know, most of the people like the JP8000 over the MS2000, and I like the MS2000's filter sound over the JP8000. So it's one of those things where I think it's really super cool for everybody here to kind of never apologize for being a scum snob. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? Walter says, no need for details, but what do you think of the KORG POLYSIX VST? I would give that a C+. Hans Volt, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? We actually checked it out on the KORG Legacy Collection to stream maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And we did a little bit of a light shootout between the POLYSIX and the actual plugin. And what I would say is they actually got the filter pretty close and the oscillator's a little less close. And then when you add it all together, especially like the effects, the ensemble and stuff sounds very digital to me. And we even shot out the ensemble, the effects section here, the chorus, phaser, and ensemble versus my plugin, Inktomi, which you can download for free. Links in the description. But I would say that I got closer to the POLYSIX sound than KORG themselves did. That's, of course, my opinion, but I would recommend anybody to go back and watch that stream. When you're done watching this stream, of course. Yeah, so what I want to say immediately, let's go back to listing down these synth sound. But wow, I mean, the sound of the POLYSIX, it's really coming out. Let's see. Adam says, can we hear the filter sweep with lower octave waves to hear how it sweeps our mics? I mean, I'm playing basically the lowest notes. I'll do it on the lowest possible notes here. So without a doubt, we're getting a more linear shape to the envelopes, which is hard to counteract. But the resonance on the AX60 is a lot more ice picky. That's not probably surprising to many people, and probably a little too much. It can be very hard to get it just right. That's kind of matching it closer. Okay, I just noticed something, and I wonder if you guys heard that on this pass, is that the when I play two notes at the same time on the POLYSIX, the way the filters move, there's a lot of, they're not perfect, right? So you get this interesting spread, which I think is so kind of integral to, for lack of a better phrase, the Tom Sawyer Rush sound, where you need the filters to not all be in alignment. You need some slop in there. On the POLYSIX, you get it for free. on the AX60, if I kind of stutter, you know, not play the notes at the same time, if I play them at the same time, a very, definitely very like precise clinical. If I play them a little slewed, you hear that? Like how it's actually a little closer to the sound of the Poly 6? The way that the resonance scales on this synth, like that's why I should get the Tontec mod for this. They sound pretty similar on the way up, but on the way down, isn't it just such a difference? Let's do no attack, longer decay. Very beautiful. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly similar, but Ricky, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Jason says the Akai costs more on eBay than the Poly 6. That's crazy. Yeah, so the thing about the AX60s are they're rarer. They're both kind of rare because very few Poly 6s escaped the 80s with, so big thing before you buy a Poly 6, just make sure that it's been serviced because the battery loves to leak on this and destroy the motherboard. So a lot of the times when you're on eBay, just make sure you're seeing that it's like been serviced because otherwise you could get really burned. But there weren't that many AX60s made either. And so I feel like the market for the AX60 is a lot more turbulent where it goes up and down. Whereas the Poly 6s, you know, tend to hang around the same price point. Somewhere it depends. Ricky, the both of the filters are four pole, 24 decibel and octave, low passes. Yes. V Vendetta, Korg reminds me of a kid turning on the Sony PlayStation 1. That sound is actually the Roland D50. That's the synthesizer they used for the opening of the the PlayStation. Adam, it was the Roland D50. The Korg wave station was used for when you turn on a Mac. That's what that was. Let's see. Ricky D, welcome to the stream. Lord, forgive me for I have sinned. Dubstation Zero says, I love basic dubstep, so having a large collection of cheaper synths gives me a lot of variety and character on similar patches, but also a reverse serial killer, keeping trophies of synths. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the upside and why I recommend buying cheaper vintage synths, because you can buy a lot of really cheap vintage synths that sound incredible. Like I love the sound of the Alpha Juno. I love the sound of the Korg DW8000. I love the sound of this Kawai K3 right here. I think they sound just phenomenal. And they do all have their own characters and flavors and things like that. So when you can buy synths for less than the cost of a Behringer DeepMind 12, that's like an authentic piece of history from the 80s, I think that's super cool. Yes. Yes, Adamski says the Casio HD6000, super cool synth, wasn't for me. Hansvold says, I love using vintage synths for dubstep. Yeah, I mean, dubstep is tough because, you know, it's doable. It's probably easier to do on the X60 because of the this. So why don't we go just a little bit crazier? And so watch your ears, everybody. We're going to crank the resonance all the way. The X60 has a fault in it where they screwed something up and like overpowered the resonance. So the resonance is just insane on the X60 for better or worse. Let's try that same thing. Watch your pet's ears. I'm curious if I pull the VCA back. No. I'm listening to that little bit of distortion hanging out in the background there, and that's not as present or present at all on the Poly6. A little bit there at the end. Lot more distortion going on this synth. It's amazing how clear that resonance is. I agree, Walter. Hans, yes, you can do VCO mod on the AX60, and you cannot on that. Oh, look who we have. It's my little friend, Lemon. Look, it's my cat, Lemon. She's visiting. Hi, Lemon. You come to hang out on the stream a little bit? Hi. I loaded up the over here with some treats, so hopefully she would hang out with us. What is it, Lemon? You want to say hi to everybody on the stream? Lemon? Hey. So anyways, of course it might be a little bit more ice picky. I don't know. What do you guys think? It's actually really crazy how much of a difference there is in the extreme resonance. Oh, don't worry, Hans. We'll get there. Wow, you can get some really Oberheim OBX type sounds out of the resonance here. Just not quite as much over here. Look at how much I have to actually skew those notes. To get that difference, whereas here, if I press the notes at the same time, you get more of that Oberheim filter slop thing. At this sort of medium strong resonance, it still just sounds so great. Let's go ahead and try playing some chords. I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of comparison. I'm surprised. It's better through that range. Let's go ahead and do the Same over here, add a pretty good amount of release on both. This is a little bit louder because of the filter compensation. There's just so much more gain, distortion. You're hearing those like weird little distorted noise, almost like bit crush type sound out of the AX60. Marcus, thank you. Welcome to the stream. Widow, I don't really know the answer to that one. I do think there's more clone parts for the POLYSIX. This is interesting. This is really interesting. On this, playing these chords, I kind of like the AX60 better. I mean, the thing though is that SSM filter with that resonance really is just like something else. It's like it's hard to compete with. I have to say, I think the POLYSIX filter is just incredible. What's super fascinating about that to me is we did 3 shootouts in a row, more or less, on this channel. We shot out the Kawai SX240, which has the same filter as this, against the Roland JX3P. Most people preferred the filter of the JX3P. We shot out that filter versus the Oberheim Matrix 6, and most people preferred the Oberheim Matrix 6 filter, which is very similar to this filter. So we have an interesting sort of Ouroboros of filter preference going on here, where the SSM, same filter as this synthesizer, sounded worse than the JX3P, which sounded worse than the Matrix 6, which has a very similar filter to this, which sounds worse than the POLYSIX. And when I say worse, I mean, I'm just saying to my preference. I think there's, and of course, kind of like what Dubstation said, there's circumstances where you'd absolutely want one over the other, but there's just something so so hard. I mean, it's pretty neck and neck. I mean, I think someone should be happy with either of these two synths. I don't know. What do you guys think? As I'm playing around here, I want to hear some more opinions on what we think are the stuff here. Black Man, welcome to the stream. Poly6 for the win. No contents. If you need to get an ESQ1 to add to the shootouts. Well, I do have the Ensoniq SQ80, which for me, I don't really feel the need to have both. But I do think they have different filters technically. Walter says there's nothing wrong with the Akai. It's just that the Poly6 punches so far above its weight and it's so pretty. Charles, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? It's worth noting that the Roland JX3P, Juno 106, Matrix 6, and the K3 are using DCOs, not VCOs. Yes, and that's exactly why these two synths to me are so captivating, is that these are both Juno-style synths in the sense that they have one voice. They have one VCO, one oscillator per voice with a sub-oscillator. We haven't even discussed the sub-oscillators yet, but they're there. Actually, am I stupid? Is there a sub-oscillator on this thing? Maybe there isn't. There might not be a sub-oscillator on this. I'm kind of like going crazy, I think. Anyways, they're both Juno 106 style synthesizers. What's interesting is that the KORG POLYSIX actually, I believe, came out before the Juno 6. So although KORG did not invent this idea of like a polysynth with a single oscillator and a sub to thicken it up, I think that would go to the Roland Jupiter 4. The KORG POLYSIX, they invented some really good tuning technology to help the VCOs in this and really put a lot of pressure on Roland to create a low-cost 6-voice polysynth. And Roland did with the Juno 6, but they used digitally controlled oscillators. Back in the 80s, that was considered a positive thing because these synthesizers love to go out of tune. I would never take one of these synths on the road or tour with them because they're so wonky. However, and it takes like an hour to tune it up if you have to open it up. So DCOs are great for that. But when you have a synth in the studio, nowadays, everybody pays more for voltage-controlled oscillators because of the way they drift. You can really hear it on the Poly6. Its oscillators are a lot less stable than the AX60. There was 5 years of technology in the meantime. So even though this still uses voltage-controlled oscillators, they are just better. There's a nice auto-tune button right here, so you don't have to really deal with it. So this is a really great synth. Actually, I would take this one on the road because of the auto-tune feature, and it is built like a fucking tank. It's all metal, really tough. Both of them are good. I would be afraid of the Poly6 a little bit more, I think. But they're both rugged, beautiful synths. They both also have some pretty good war scars on them, which I appreciate myself. It's not for everybody. Regal, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Ensemble generator on the Poly6 cannot be beat. No, the only thing that's close is the free plugin Inktomi. Link it in the description. Yes, that's correct, actually, Dubstation, Nick. Yes, well, so there's also pulse width modulator and filter FM. So I guess we're going to go back to the oscillator section and kind of mess with that. I've heard different things, Charles. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what it is. The 60 was a response to the Poly6 because it's got patch memory. Could be wrong about that. Yeah, so I wanted to be real, just like, let's start with some sawtooths and then check out the filters, because to me, that's the most interesting thing. I want to know real quick. I'm not going to run a poll in the chat. Maybe I'll do it at the end of the stream, but I want to ask the question now. Do the Curtis chips sound cold to you? Because that's what everybody says about Curtis chips. And I don't know that I think they sound cold. Of the two, which do you prefer? And does one sound colder than the other? I don't really know. I mean, they both sound good. The Poly6 resonance has a certain je ne sais quoi to it, but you can't separate that from the oscillators too. It could be just the wilderness of those oscillators. I want you to hear the difference here. If I play an octave... Okay, I'm going to turn the resonance and the cutoff all the way up so you just hear this. Listen to how in tune this is. right? Versus down low. Listen, I mean, it's so much more out of tune in this lower octave. It's actually flat, and that's in spec. So interestingly, in the Surface Manual, the Poly6 actually, it says that that's how it should be. Like pretty close to perfect tune. Way the fuck out. Like as if you turn the detune knob up. Over here on this synth, we'll probably have Rockstar tuning down low. Actually, a little bit. It does come out a little bit, but I mean, only because this is so freaking tight. Black Man says the AX60, yeah, that's designed by the same designer who what is it, Firstman and a few of the Multivox. That guy, really famous, probably invented the very first synthesizer in Japan who developed the AX80, sort of the sister to this synth. 2 VCOs per voice, but they're DCO, so I've always wanted to get my hands on one of them, membrane switches, yada, yada, yada. This is the one that people kind of put up there as the better of the two, but I don't know about that. I mean, I'm questioning the difference between, you know, the whole DCO versus VCO thing. We've listened to a lot of really good sounding DCO synths on this channel at this point. Another thing that is really noteworthy, Charles Main says, is that the X60 was designed to directly interface with the Akai samplers. Yes, I really want to get an Akai sampler, run it in here. It's just, how much money am I going to spend on synthesizers? And then you can use that sampler, essentially as another oscillator. That's something that the Poly6 can't do at all. And what's cool about that is you basically have an analog D50 type thing going on, which I think is super cool. Dubstation says, not cold to me. I love Curtis Electromusic chips. Mad Mike, Dynamite, welcome to the stream. What a great name. Okay, so let's go back and talk about the oscillator. So we'll start on the Poly6 because it's simpler. We've got the sawtooth. We've got a pulse wave. Very dark. Then we have pulse width modulation. Oh, back to, we can control the pulse width continually variable. Right, so if we want to do that, pulse width modulation, we're not going to notice anything until we increase the amount here. Very sort of iconic pulse width modulation. Sounds a little different than every other synth I have. The combination of the pulse width modulation, the filter, the ensemble, and stuff like that takes the Poly6 into this just crazy territory. If that didn't sound big enough, which already, I mean, the oscillator sounds much fatter than the X60. We have a sub oscillator, so we can turn that on and really get some huge sounds. Yeah, and of course we go 2 octaves down. I use that a little less. A little bit better for like bell type sounds if you want to go for that once you introduce the filter. And that's about it as far as the oscillator section goes on the Poly6. It is sort of the essence of simplicity and everything sounds great. And everything has its own flavor too, which is why I love the Poly6 so much as compared to some other 80s synthesizers, analog synths from the 80s, where if we were only talking about the oscillators, sometimes they can be a little boring. AX60, not boring at all. We have a lot going on here that takes it far beyond just being a regular thing. So back to the sawtooth. Let's turn the release down a bit. Actually sounds pretty good. We can control the pulse width of the saw, as well as introduce pulse width modulation. What's interesting about that is, to my ear, it sort of sounds like you've got the way that goes through zero. I think is kind of the fatal flaw, because I'd really love for that modulation to be in there. But it's so periodic. Let's control it with the EG depth. That's another thing we can do, is actually control the pitch of the oscillators, which we can't do on the Poly 6. So that takes it way ahead of the Poly 6, right? Let me make a kick drum. Little like techno. And change the waveform to a square wave. Pretty good. Anyways, that's not really what I want to do right now, but I just wanted to demonstrate that that's possible. If we take the pulse width all the way up on the square wave, you can hear that it goes just up to zero. That's correct, Walter. I don't have any. Dave's not here. Welcome. Oh, I love Not in Love by Crystal Castles, especially with Robert from The Cure. We have a triangle wave. Obviously, that's not even a thing on the Poly 6. You'd have to go to the KORG monopoly for that, which I've got sitting over there. Sounds great. What's really interesting is the triangle plus sawtooth. This is where it gets really fat, and I think worth comparing again to the even with the oscillator, sub-oscillator on. Different types of sounds. But that triangle wave, having that additionally in there, it really can, wow, it's hard to get that just right. I need to get this contact modded so bad. That way there could be a little bit of like an in-between. The thing about the way the faders are on this synth is a little weird, so I need to get that modified, but oh well, there's only so much time. The thing is that with that sawtooth wave plus the triangle, things get so fat. This sounds, it's so incredible. And then of course we're going to add pulse width modulation to that. So I think for me, the fatal flaw is that the pulse width modulation, the way it works, it's sort of like adding the opposite of the pulse width of the square wave into either the saw or triangle wave, and it just doesn't really work on the saw or triangle wave. Here's with the triangle wave. Really here, it's like the opposite of it or something. It sounds great on the square wave. I think maybe the only problem with that is it sounds really great on the Poly 6 too. So if we're just comparing the two, it doesn't really give it an advantage. With the saw and the triangle, there's enough going on that it sort of pulls that additional pulse width modulation back and makes it a little bit more usable. Maybe using a fast amount. For me, it's not my taste. I think it's really only usable in the really low range. Tim, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yeah, Nick is correct. I'm barely hanging on to a sampler, the DSS-1. Yeah, so the thing about the waveforms on the AX60 is I love them, but I just wish that the pulse width modulation was different. But again, that's maybe not even what I really go for this synth. I think the AX60 is such... My thing is it just sounds so freaking good, but part of why I love doing these versus streams, they don't do as well on YouTube, which doesn't matter because I'm getting paid off by the corporate overlords anyways. So I don't really have to, have people actually watch what I do on YouTube. But the thing is that when you hear two synths against each other, and in this case, they're very similar in terms of architecture, but even if they're not, it often is very revealing. And in this case, I'm really seeing how great the POLYSIX is. It's just kind of like perfect in the way everything is about it versus over here on the AX60. The individual components aren't as... That's not to say, though, that when you get it all together, it can't be even better. So we will get there. Couple more things. We've got noise. And it is fully variables, which is nice. So if you just want a little bit of noise in there, let's use a little of this. We could just go... Which could be really nice. Versus just, that's fine, but add a little of that. Get a little of that sound in there. It's very nice, sort of windy, sweepy type thing. God, I just love how this synthesizer sounds. Yeah, so good. Yeah, they're my favorite Wednesday nights too. You will notice that you're losing more of that low end. So what are some other things? We can actually keyboard track both of these guys, so it's not that interesting. We do have a high pass filter built into the X60. It's nice that it's fully variable, so you can get some thinner sounds if you want. Can be useful sometimes. You don't always want all of that low end. I think for pads, it'd probably be useful. But then again, if you're cranking the resonance, you lose some of that low end too. So I don't know. For me, it's not like that. I don't know about you guys. I don't use the high pass filters on any of my synthesizers. Like, unless it's like we're talking about a synthesizer where the high pass filter is replacing the low pass filter, like on the CS70M or Hans Volt Oberheim expander. Otherwise, the high pass filter, I just EQ it afterwards. But I guess back in the 80s, this was a very useful feature just for making the patches work, because a lot of times it was just like synthesizer into the speakers, right? So in this case, I think, yeah. Widow, you're very welcome. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Okay. Let's talk about the coolest feature of the AX60, which is the filter FM. So what that's doing is it's sending the oscillator as a control voltage to the filter. And that allows us to get some pretty crazy sounds. Now, if I turn the resonance off all the way, you'll hear that we've just got this really nice slow pad. We can actually turn it down so we get more of like a key sound. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, actually, before we keep going, I want to see if I can recreate that sound. Let's move it over to the pulse width. Actually crazy. Really can't match them all that well. I'm actually very surprised by that. Good on the X60. So that's just another example of how sometimes you're messing with these in the individual parts, but then a synthesizer starts to take you down a certain path. Bill, welcome to the stream. I think the X60 is awesome too. I don't really know. I haven't, I've been talking with John from Edgestone Studios about doing like a dual scum night forever because he's got an AX80. Yes. So, yeah, the AX60 is just sounding really good. I think some of it is the digital envelopes just sound really good for this type of sound. Also, when I play notes in key. The other thing is that this has two envelopes as opposed to one. So in this case, we're using one envelope that's controlling both the filter and the amplifier, whereas on the X60, we can control the filter independent from the amplifier. And so what we're also getting is just a little bit more presence out of the AX60. If you want to have release on your sound, which I think is pretty critical for getting both of these synths to sound beautiful a lot of the time, in that case, you're going to want to have the envelope being sent to the amplifier. And what that means is that you're going to be sharing that envelope with also the filter. In this case, you can get release while having a different sort of shape. So for instance, you don't have to lose sustain, which I do in this case. So that's just, you know, an interesting little difference. Continuing on with filter FM. As I crank that, you'll notice some things happen. Okay, so the way it works on this synthesizer sort of sounds like amplitude modulation at first. I don't know if that's related to the LFO. I don't think it has anything to do with the LFO. Which is so interesting to me, the way it kind of pulls in and out. So if someone can explain to me why that is, I feel like you do. There is a tonal difference already, but it's really as you crank the resonance. So I'm going to resonance, just a little bit of resonance. Sorry, I'll bring that down a little bit. The beautiful resonance pad, Curtis resonance pad. Fast, decay there. As we increase this, this is where it gets. Crazy. Listen to how that kind of comes in and out. But it's very dependent on the cutoff frequency too, guys. And then as soon as you crank the resonance, it starts getting really crazy. And this is where the fact that they screwed up and like cranked the resonance like crazy on the AX60 kind of isn't bad, because it's this is where it gets really fun. That is true, Black Man. That's a great question, Bill. I usually look that up before the stream. Today I didn't. It depends. They hover around, I would guesstimate around 2,000 for both of them, but they could be as low as, probably 1,400. Maybe I've seen, I don't know. Probably about 2,000 for this. And I don't know. Someone look it up for me. I don't want to give numbers. It's hard to say. Hard to say. I mean, listen how crazy that is. Let me see. Is this it? Yeah, it's not that. I just want to make sure I was, I think it's just a pulse width. I'm really excited to shoot this out against the Prophet 600, which also can do Filter FM. Oberheim Matrix 6 can also do Filter FM. But there's just something about the AX60 where it sounds completely different to me. We could go for a little POB brass. Remember how kind of boring this can be. I mean, it's not bad sounding, but... This thing gets so fucking apocalyptic. Nick says his AX60 is currently the lowest on Reverb for $850 and $100 shipping. That's awesome, because I have seen these guys sell for $2,000. So that's less than half of what I've seen these go for. So if anybody's interested in it, I mean, I think the AX60 is phenomenal. I think for certain things, like if you want to do the Juno thing, the Poly6 is just great. It's just, you know. But you can already hear, like, it's a lot more basic in its sound, whereas this can just go. Throw some reverb on that. Holy shit, right? What a awesome thing. So anyways, I love doing that. Now we're back to our sound. Right, really warm sounding. Just sounds great. Yeah, just a really phenomenal sounding warm synth. Let's go ahead and compare the, let's go back to just a very basic sawtooth wave. Let's open up the filter all resonance all the way down. Bring the release down. Then we'll go over here, kind of the same idea. We'll just try to get it to sound about the same overall. There we go. So we've more or less. We're going to bring the release down a bit. Yeah, that's about the same. Decays. Give it a little decay. It doesn't really need that. Again, there's a shape difference to the envelopes. I think it's more exponential on the Poly6 and more linear and digital on the AX60. Hard to say. Now, let's compare the effects. So this is a huge part of what makes the Poly6, and the AX60, the AX60. We'll start with the chorus, and we will turn it off. But you'll notice, if I turn it on and off, on the both of these synths, but you'll really notice it on the Poly6, we lose high end, right? And that's just sort of part of analog bucket brigade chips is what they're called. Essentially, it's a delay that's being really tightly in tune, or it's barely delayed from the original signal, and it causes phase cancellation, much like having two oscillators. And the thing is that those chips will actually alias, even though they're analog. So this is like a myth that aliasing is unique to digital audio systems, but technically any limited network or system of audio can alias. And in the case of something like this, these chips do. So they filter that out with a low pass filter. It's literally they throw a low pass filter into the circuitry. Versus that's with on its slowest setting, right? Which is pretty interesting to me. The difference already. So it's going to kind of warm it up. Let's increase to 50%. There's such an interesting periodic nature to the Poly6. Moving over to the AX60, our effects section is a lot less complicated. We've basically got off, on, and all the way. So it's like off 50% and 100%. But I want you to hear how good this sounds. So it's really not even fair to compare the two, because the AX60's chorus is stereo, and it's just, if you're listening to this like on a phone or something and it's mono, you might not hear too much of a difference, but the lushness of the AX60 and the hugeness of it is just incomparable. Turn the volume down even further. Yeah, really great. We can then turn that up even further if we want it. So we can get these really warbly type sounds. And the thing about, I've said it before, what really makes analog circuitry so great a lot of the times is not even that it's analog, but the fact that it's just the way that the designers tuned these settings. It's like you can't get a bad sound out of it. That's like on the borderline of bad. If I turn the chorus all the way on, it's just the fucking sawtooth, right? Versus, so the AX60 is like one of the best choruses ever. Of course, I love the effects in the Poly6, but when you compare the two, it's going to get a little tough for the Poly6 to compete. We also have a phaser in the Poly6. And I love a phaser. Love a good phaser. Compare that to the chorus. Turn that up really fast. It's kind of more of like a 70s. Don't love it as much, the nature of the way that sounds, whereas on a slow setting, it really does thicken it up, but just to, you know, really no comparison is there. And then the ensemble is really great for getting those sort of Mellotron, Roland VP330 string type sounds. But again, it's not stereo, so that's the one kind of bummer. Because it now is using 3 separate BBD chips, we're getting even more intense filtering. So the difference between this and the chorus, so here's the chorus. Warmth is crazy. So if you love those Blade Runner string sounds, I mean, that's really great, but it's going to be mono. So this is the first time, like, you almost have to bring the cutoff down. On the ensemble, it affects intensity as opposed to the speed. So that brings in all those other chips, and it does get really lush. It's practically a super saw. Both of these synthesizers, though, I just have to say the effects are so satisfying. There's nothing more vintage sounding than that sound, right? Over here, I guess I could take the octave up. BCF depth level. So in this case, without anything else going on to sort of thicken up the sound, you can hear how thick it gets on the Poly6. want to go for that VP330 thing, I think you more or less have to go with something like that. Esteban, welcome to the stream. For the Akai synthesizer I like the most is the VX600. Yeah, so that's a really cool synth. It's one of the only synthesizers that I'm aware of that has both voltage-controlled oscillators and polyphonic aftertouch. So that's a very cool thing. Bill says, I remember the X60 had some cool arpeggiator stuff, and I think you'd save the ARP settings to patch memory. I believe that's correct. Mark hasn't seen Blade Runner yet. That's pretty crazy. Yes, Gerald, I agree. I'm not convinced of that. I think we all agree that the CM chips sound very warm. I will say that this synth overall can get more ice picky, of course, because it's just got this crazy resonance to it. So we can talk about arpeggiators, but to me, I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll have to do it, right? We got to do it. Let's make a pluck. We'll increase the depth level. With the chorus on, and we'll do the same thing over here. You have very tight. Not quite as tight. But it's amazing how quickly they diverge. They both sound great, but definitely different. Sounds very good on the POLYSIX. Much more modern of a sound on the AX60, isn't it? You know, a difference, you really start to hear the difference. It's actually quite surprising. Anyways, let's talk about the arpeggiator. So I could just turn it on real quick. Speed control, not too surprising. We can arpeggio hold, so I can do a complex chord. And what we'll do is we'll move through different modes. We have a cool chord mode. Which is kind of nice if you want to just get like a staccato thing going, right? Cool. Okay, arpeggiator. That's what that did. Same thing over here. We can hold a chord. We can actually hold a chord in here. In this case, I'm going to turn the arpeggio on, and latch is already on, so I can play that same complex chord. It's very slow. Octave control, which we don't seem to have over here. and this really interesting one called full, which will go all the way to the highest notes it can hit, even if it's not on the keyboard. In this case, we only have up, down, and up, down. By the way, can I get some scum cheers in the chat? I haven't been drinking alcohol. I don't know who I've become. So for everybody who makes Wednesday nights here on YouTube the best place to be, I love this live stream so much and this incredible community. I just want to say thank you to you guys. Scum cheers. I've got tequila flying out of the glass onto synthesizers. Oh, silly Alex. Cheers, guys. I appreciate you. Yeah, so that sounds really good. Yeah, so you can do splits and layers, Bill. You can split. I don't think you can do layers, which I think is a bit of a shame, unfortunately. Craig, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yeah, so that is one difference. We do have Unison mode on both of them. Turn that Arpeggiator off. Sounds good, but I don't know. Moving over, we can turn the Unison on over here. VCA sustain all the way up, VCF sustain all the way up. Sounds pretty rockin'. Surprisingly similar. So those are the unison modes between the two. I'm actually surprised how close you can get. Neither of them has unison detune, which is a shame. It would be great to be able to detune those further. I don't almost ever use the unison feature in either of these guys. It just doesn't seem to me to be a thing that I would need to do. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger omissions I kind of forgot about is the fact this doesn't have a sub-oscillator, but I never seem to miss it on the synth. Really love the AX60. What else is there to talk about? I think those are the main components of the synth. We skipped the the LFO. That's because it LFOs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are some differences. So, you know, let's take it out of unison. We'll go back to poly mode. We'll just start with like kind of a basic. Very full. LFO, we can take the cutoff down. And we can apply the LFO to the voltage controlled filter. In this case, we can run it to the VCO, the VCF, or the VCA. Let's start by running it just to the filter so we can hear what we're doing. You know, it wobbles. Let's do the same thing. LFO select to the VCF, and then we could do the same thing. I don't know, they're pretty close. Go back to the VCA and add some release to these. Yeah, so, I mean, again, you hear the difference in the filter character. Now, the big difference is we have different waveforms to choose from. So we could go to the square wave. Go to random. This is very cool. So we have sample and hold. Gerald, I'm not ever saying that the Polysix tuning is not stable. It actually is stable, but what's in spec about it is to go slightly flat in the low octave. That's just what a Polysix does. So yeah, we've got sample and hold. We've got ramp down. We can get these sorts of sounds. Notice you can get a little bit of spread on that. I think it's just the different slight variations in filter tuning. We could go ramp up. So again, I'm doing this wrong. Ramp up. For those types of sounds. Let's check real quick here. I think we only have one LFO, but if I run it to the VCA, let's say. Yeah, we've now lost it on the filter, which is fine. We've only got one LFO here either. And actually, both of these synthesizers do a very nice thing that you don't see on every synth, which is that we have a separate LFO dedicated just to pulse width modulation on both of these synths. So technically, they have two LFOs per voice, which might not be obvious, or not per voice. We have two LFOs. They're both monophonic in the sense that they will just do the same thing across all of the voices. But it's good to see, because I hate it on synths when you have to borrow a LFO for the pulse width modulation, and now you don't have any way to modulate the filter or the amplifier. I think that sucks. Square wave. Let's discuss speed real quick on these. Let's go back to the VCF, and we'll change back to triangle wave. And then we can just check out the speed range. So we could go very slow. Very slow versus speed here. Very slow as well. Let's take that up. This is one of those things. It's at 50%, it's already very fast. And we can take it all the way up into audio rate. Almost. Over here, let's bring the speed up. So at 50% is much more of a reasonable, much more usable. And I think that's an example of discretion on the designers, that they actually were like, hey, we're going to make sure that this is, restrained so that, again, it's hard to turn the knobs and get a bad sound. I actually think you can go slightly faster on the Polysix. Yeah, so I mean, and we can delay the that amount as well. Very surprisingly similar sounds. We can add a delay, so 50% delay on both of them. We'll probably get, delay kicks in faster. We could slow that to maximum delay just for the fuck of it. Listen to how nicely that comes in, though, on the AX60. You get like a nice smooth fade in of that filter modulation. Maximum delay on the Polysix. And you'll notice that I have to turn this up a little bit, the sustain, just because we're losing so much volume. But you'll hear that it doesn't fade in that amount. It just jumps in. So it just jumps in. Swan of Nutella, welcome to the stream. Yes, it is. It's just hanging out on a Five Nights at Freddy's fan. Let's see. Danger Guitar Mods, Happy New Year to you too. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I hope you all have a wonderful 2024. Yes, I absolutely think the Akai synths are underrated. I would love to get an Akai AX60 in here one day. So yeah, I think I've more or less covered the differences between the two. There is pitch bend on the POLYSIX, but there is also pitch bend intensity on the AX60. We also have cutoff frequency, min, max, and modulation here. Whereas on the POLYSIX, we just have the modulation generators controlled by this. We have a spring-loaded one pitch wheel on the AX60. We do not on the POLYSIX, so it's kind of more like a mini Moog, or just most Moog synths. Yeah, I think that's the differences. So now is the fun part of the stream where I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think? I almost wiped out. What do you guys think about these two synthesizers? And of the two, which do you think is the one? So we're going to start a poll. Synth is better for the price. We're going to go POLYSIX. AX60. And to me, I think this is a very interesting poll in the sense that the the AX60 can do more, technically, for sure. But the POLYSIX might have it eked out on terms of just like the raw oscillator and filter sound. But the AX60's filter and oscillator sound great too, so it's very hard. Zap, how's it going? Yes, it's got a VCA on the vibrato delay, not just a gate. That's perfectly said. Ricky says, I just had to go hook up the AX60 along with the Akai S612. I would love to be able to have that particular setup that you have, Ricky. And sample the patch from the DW8000 sounded pretty good. I just want to be able to do D50 shit, but with the Akai AX60. I think that would be pretty overpowered. Mark says, lights and mic seem upgraded. No mic problems and looks more bright, but maybe the camera is on a different side than usual. I'm always working on the color grading, creating LUTs for this stream. Trying to get it as close as I can. I actually lowered the ISO on a couple of my cameras, but I think just the improved dynamic range is particularly good looking stream. I don't really know why. It also depends on where I'm standing in the room. So if I'm standing in the way of some of these lights, it kind of gets a little blown out. But thank you. Microphone, I'm always working on trying to get it to sound better. Sometimes I've had to swap. I was having mic problems for a bit there. And then when I bought a new one of these guys, I was able to get pretty good. So yeah, I would love Ricky to find out, get an AX80 at some point. It seems like a really awesome DCO synth. You guys have heard me say it before. I feel like I've got too many DCO synths because they kind of all fill like the same territory. Not necessarily, but it's like, I don't know. They are a little closer sounding. I don't even think it's that they're DCOs. I'm starting to kind of not believe that DCOs are all that worse than VCOs. I think it's just that they, I don't know that I need all of them. Whereas the hybrid stuff, at least the different wavetables really put them in their own territory. DW8000 has a very different sounding filter from anything else out there. POLYSIX, different sounding filter. SX240 does not sound like a POLYSIX, even though it's got the same filter. Ricky, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Swan of Nutella says, missed most of this, so I abstained from vote, but what I did catch, both sounded great. Would be stoked to acquire either. Yes, I agree. Someone should definitely buy Dubstation Zero's Akai AX60 for $850. That is a steal. Like, think about what's a Behringer DeepMind 12 going for nowadays? Like pretty close to that, right? $800, I think, for a DeepMind 12. Aquatic, how's it going? Hey, you never have to worry or apologize. It's just good to see you. Let's see, Behringer DeepMind 12. What are these going for nowadays? Yeah, $800. Yeah, 800 motherfucking dollars, right? So yeah, for $850, you could get a true vintage analog synthesizer that is so unique sounding. I'm not commenting on Behringer because I have not lawyered up. And let me just say, some motherfuckers got some shit to say in the comments section of my most recent video. That's a side note. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think vintage synths that are priced at the sub $1,000, that's a really awesome category when it comes to synths. So yeah, just something to think about there. Let's see, I'm going to catch up with the chat. Mark wants to know if he could borrow $950. I'd never recommend going into debt for synthesizers. Zav said, just bought a Poly or I would. AX60 seems awesome. It really is. Not everybody likes them. I think I champion the AX60 more than most. I just think it's a really unique sounding synth. And it constantly surprises me. The sounds, the presets are actually really good. They're very wonky. I've done a stream just on the presets if you want to check that out, probably about a year ago. It just can do so, it can transform into so many different types of synths. That's what I love about it. When you listen to the individual parts, it doesn't seem like it should be that good. It's kind of like the Roland D50 in that sense. The individual parts of the Roland D50 to me are not that impressive. It's only when you put it all together and then it's just fucking magic. And that's how I feel about the AX60. Yeah, I definitely want to try out the X80. So let's see where this polls at here. It's 75% AX60. That is crazy. Oh my God. I would not have guessed that at the beginning of the stream. Is Akai still in business? They are, but they're not making analog synths that I'm aware of. I guess the Timberwolf. I mean, I think they're bought by In Music, right? Walter says, you have a lot of synths that are in the same vein price bracket, which is great since you can really get really deep into the details and get onto the best value. Taxes are coming soon, everybody. When that keyboard is gone, we will see who got them first. Yeah, I think that I think my favorite synths are the ones that are very cheap. I was talking to Jeremy Parker, another YouTuber at KnobCon, and he was asking me which of the vintage synths are my favorite. And it's one of those things. It's like, I want to say the CS70M, but truthfully, it can't do a great vibrato. And what I'm most excited about are synths like the Kwai K1 that you get for like $200 because it sounds so cool, so unique, so different. And I think it sounds really good. It sounds bad in a good way. Like, I could totally understand in 1988 when it came out or so, people being like, oh God, this doesn't sound nearly as good as a Roland D50, right? I get that. But nowadays, to have that vintage digital retro gritty wavetable-y sound, just like, I think it's so beautiful. I think it's a gorgeous sounding synth. $200, vintage synth, incredible. Swanum to tell us, I was going to say after this video the X60 will be the same price as the POLYSIX. I don't know what the POLYSIXs are going for right now. I usually check the prices of synths before the stream, and I was a bad streamer and just didn't do that. But yeah, it's just, both of the synths kind of go through different phases. They're less rationalized than the Juno 106 market. So yeah, enjoy the Norwegian bubble burst. Gingy, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? So anyways, guys, I think that's a good place to call it for the night. I'm convinced that Curtis chips do not sound cold. Like, that was kind of my secret motivation for the stream, was to figure out, is it true that Curtis chips sound cold? The resonance on the AX60 can get crazy, but I don't think that's a Curtis chip thing. I think that they both sounded really good, and I think if the Poly6 sounded warmer, it had probably more to do with the oscillators than anything. But I thought they both could sound really, really good. Walter says the K1 is great when you have had your meat and potatoes PCM sounds sorted out, and then you need flavor in your palate. Yeah, I agree with that. Zap says the EMU and Ensoniq stuff, if you get a cleaner backups. Yeah, I mean, my Ensoniq SQ80, I haven't done nearly enough streams on it, but I'm pretty sure that might be like the greatest vintage synth in a certain kind of way when you think about like the price and what you get out of it. Just sounds so great. Really want to try out the AX80 at some point. So we'll see. Maybe I could get my hands on a cheap one. Anyways, guys, I got a little bit of this Añejo tequila left. Why don't we do one more cheers? So if I get some scum cheers in the chat. I love the shit out of every single one of you guys for making Wednesday nights the best night of the week. Thank you for being amazing. And yeah, love you. Cheers. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you guys make some awesome music. Thank you, guys. Bill says, I know where a shit ton of Ensoniq and EMUs are. I hope it's at your place. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you for being amazing. Continue to be excellent, and I will see you guys next week.